there's nothing we can do about it, and they're more kind of environmental. And then there's interactive ones where there's a push and push back relationship with them. And maybe that's the direction where we're more headed, because like we talked about, just because we're in this really bizarre era that just because you've never met somebody in your life doesn't mean that you haven't had very good conversations with them online about something. It's a very strange place to be. Yes.
It could be in your distinction on that same question, that where you're using personal influence and impersonal influence, which were the respective book titles, that one of the difficulties may be that what was really unique about Katz and Lazarsfeld's personal influence was it was multidimensional. People talked to all their friends, their neighbors, and so on.
Absolutely.
Whereas television had the unique characteristic, or not the unique, but at least the distinctive characteristic of being one-dimensional. You listened. People sit around in circles and watch this box. And the web is coming back to interactive, multi-dimensional communication. Even television shows now try to have blogs going on at the same time. As
exactly.
But certainly a lot of the websites are meant to have people blogging and doing other things. So it could be that what you're seeing is just a renaissance of personal communication in the interactive sense. And television was the abnormal period because it was the one-directional period. It's a hypothesis.
It seems certainly reasonable going with what you talked about. And you make a good point. Personal influence. I really only I read a lot of other analyses on it, putting it in historical context that were helpful. I really didn't. Really only I tend to really glance through it and take in all its complexity. But you're talking about a study of a small town in which we're not just talking about who's the respected information source on political things and news things. We're talking about who you want to ask when you want to know what movie to see, what clothes to wear, and so young people were very much agents of personal influence as well. Yeah, there's definitely a boomerang effect you're kind of seeing here, that maybe this technology just kind of had this kind of this bump in the road and is coming back and is going to swing back around, and that this is our natural, I think that's our natural desire to be social beings, and if we can take a form of technology and make it more personal and make it more social, we're going to hopefully go in that direction. I might be overly optimistic, I don't know.
Teacher will tell.
I'm not quite sure where my question lies here, but I know in the last decade or so we've had a lot of push at the elementary levels to include more understanding, social studies and our democratic process and our core democratic values. And I'm wondering if, as you do your research in the future, if that's going to make an effect to overcome some of the declining parent involvement.
I think so. I think definitely if mass media was the one thing I really was like, why aren't they talking about this in political socialization literature? Education was definitely the next biggest thing, and there were some studies that put it in there pretty well, but there wasn't anything and that would definitely be another excellent topic of research, is how educational programs and how ideas like core democratic values are actually impacting how students see their political universe, so to speak. Yeah, I think maybe that is why we're seeing that push, because I think that's the most direct educational response we can make when we see when people are voting less and less and less. How can we stem this? Well, we got to explain from the very youngest ages, from 5th grade, that this is how things are run, and this is how it's going to and this is where the part that you're going to play in it.
It also makes me wonder too, if you, as a teacher, sometimes it's difficult to separate your own beliefs from what you're teaching. And if you have the same beliefs as what the children's parents have, is that a bigger influence on the kid? Or if you have opposite thoughts of what the parents have, does that make the kids start to see both sides and start to...
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question, and I think one of the things I came across in doing this research is, the general idea that everyone needs to participate and everyone needs to vote regardless of opinion, was really important. Like in constructing those measures, there were questions available to me about your opinions on various issues, but those weren't the measures we were looking for, measures of partisanship. And in fact, this is something they make a big point about in participation in America, that, you know, about the different forms of participating. There are some that are very partisan and issue-based, and there are some that are just very general. You know, we need to participate in general, and I think that's the emphasis if we're going to get kids really thinking and engaged. Because not every student is really going to feel strongly about political issues, but I think every student's but I think you can, you know, have a sense in every student of this is, this is the world I live in. I'm an important part of it, and for better or worse, I need to find a way to take part in it. You know, whether that's through voting, whether that's through volunteering. I think that's the overall most important aspect when we're talking about civic participation and civic education.
It actually might tie a little bit into Nick's question about the impact of socioeconomic status and parental socioeconomic status in an indirect way, because if parental socioeconomic status is associated with the kind of school district in which you're living, it could also have something to do with the quality of the teachers you're engaged with, which in turn, so you have teachers as another personal influence factor that are not really directly represented in the model, but are somewhat there through the parental SES.
Yeah. Question being.
There's no question.
It was just an observation. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, when I was talking about that big composite model, socioeconomic status is at the very top before any of the participation and stuff like that. That's the first thing. And, you know, yeah, the higher socioeconomic status is going to have a higher participation rate.
Yeah, and there's lots that goes into that besides just parental income. It's also different school quality and teachers.
Exactly, and that was one of those things that I was fortunate to have a variable available for that was, you know, already an index variable, because that would be pretty. That's their people that it's their job to construct very good indexes of that, as I learned at MC 380. I guess. Yeah, I had somewhere else I was going in terms of the classrooms and stuff like that. But yeah, I think when you are looking at that's a way to kind of schools as an equalizing force, I think is what kind of getting at, and the idea that if you have students in disadvantaged schools still being taught that their world is important, that their world is important, they can make a difference in their communities. I think that's a pretty important thing, and probably even more important than the